Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. This is the series where we break down the lessons we can learn, as DMs and as players, from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're tackling episode 24 of the Vox Machina campaign, The Feast. This is the last of these 3 Critical Role episodes I'm covering weekly. After this, we'll go back to releasing them every other week. But if you'd like the series to go weekly for the long term, that will happen once I reach 1,000 patrons. I'd also love to do that, I just don't have the bandwidth to do it on my own. I need to hire an editor, and having been an editor for hire before, I know what a reasonable rate would be for the work that goes into these videos. We left off last time with the party being told that the Briarwoods were coming to town for a fancy dinner, and then Percy ran down to the workshop to tinker. As this episode opens, Tiberius goes to the Alabaster Lyceum, where the teleportation sigils for the city are housed. More on that later. While the rest of the party goes to talk to Percy to try to figure out what's going on.
Lord and Lady Briarwood are responsible for the death of my entire family.
Oh.
Whitestone was my home. Many years ago. I don't want to get into the details. I came from a big family. I came from a proud family. One night, they were invited in to our home, and over the course of that night, they slaughtered everybody. They are evil. They are corrupting. The few survivors of Castle Whitestone who did survive only survived through deceit and by working for the Briarwoods, turning on their masters. My sister Cassandra, my younger sister, I see somehow evaded capture. I don't know. She set me free. I don't know what became of her. I don't know what became of any of my siblings.
He also says that he chased down Dr. Ripley, one of the Briarwoods agents who helped conquer Whitestone, but he never got close to her. He got thrown in jail. That's where Vox Machina found him.
I put down my gun and I turned the barrel. And on the barrel is, of the 6 barrels, 5 of them have names.
Oh, shit.
And Lord and Lady Briarwood are 2 of those names. Dr. Ripley is another.
What are the other ones?
Sir Stonefell is the other, and Professor Anders is the other, and then there's one blank one.
Are they all members of the same party?
Yes.
They travel with Briarwoods.
I don't know.
Sir Carrion Stonefell was the captain of the Briarwoods Guard, and Professor Anders was the tutor for the young Derolos, who colluded with the Briarwoods and let them into the castle. Meanwhile, we cut to Tiberius at the Alabaster Lyceum, and I legitimately really enjoy this scene. Tiberius goes to the clerk to request the teleportation circle for Kraghammer, but Orion assumes this clerk is the same person they've talked to every other time they've teleported and starts talking to him like he's the same person. And only once he's made his request does Matt realize Orion's misunderstanding. But he plays it off in character rather than retconning the scene.
I'm Tiberius Stormwind from Draconia.
Right. If you're talking about sigils for teleportation, you would probably have to discuss that with Gatekeeper Xanthus.
Yeah, where was he? I thought that was you.
No.
Oh.
I'm the clerk.
So they go to Gatekeeper Xanthus, who is the individual they've been talking to whenever they teleport back to Amon. But that guy doesn't have the authority to give over the travel runes either. Only the headmaster can do that.
Oh, hello again.
Hi, I'm Tiberius Stormwind from Draconia.
Those rooms are currently under very protected lock and key, approval by the headmaster, Thurmond Adlam himself.
Okay, well, where is he? Like,
Oh my god.
can you take...
It's like calling Time Warner Cable.
Can you take me to him, or where is he at?
They go to the office of Headmaster Thurmond, and Tiberius makes his request. But the headmaster can't give out the sigil for Kraghammer without talking to the Thunderbrands. So they get the Thunderbrands on the phone.
Can I help you? Hello. I'm Tiberius Stormwind from Draconia. Moreover, Vox Machina, through my circle of teleportation spell and whatnot, using your arcane gates. That's about it. Well put.
So Tiberius makes his case to the head of House Thunderbrand. This guy isn't inclined to help Tiberius, but since Tiberius says they did obtain one of the items House Thunderbrand asked them to find in the Underdark, that might help. Except Tiberius didn't bring it with him.
We can't just let anyone just willy-nilly knowing how to directly appear in the center of our homestead?
Of course. I mean, sorry, I started to talk like.
Bring me another accent.
Of course. Dopey, I wouldn't expect you to, but yeah, exactly, that's him.
So the guy hangs up, and Tiberius goes back to Grayskull Keep to get the proof he needs so they can teleport to Kraghammer. And as a reminder, all of this is just to get paid for the first mission we saw on stream, to go back to the people we met in episodes 1 and 2 and get their money. Aside from the fact that I think this scene is a lot of fun, I want to highlight how Matt stays true to the reality of the world. Obviously, the logistics of his world could be anything, but he felt it was unrealistic that someone could just walk into a place as important as this, where the teleportation circles for the city are regulated, and get access to a sigil. Heck, he clearly thinks that teleportation circles are something that would be held safe by the government. That already tells us a lot about Matt's world-building approach for Exandria. And in this scene, yes, he could have just said, "You go to the Lyceum and you are directed to the headmaster," and picked up the scene there. But we've talked about this before. Part of Matt's approach is to walk his players through the events as if they're really happening, as if they're moving through the world. And in this case, that means realistically playing out what happens when Tiberius gets to the front desk, and demonstrating how the bureaucracy works. It's part of Matt's effort to make the players work for what they get, even when there are practically no roles required. And this may not be the right move for your group. Not everybody is into real-time depiction of every step of their journey. But thankfully, in this case, it winds up being pretty funny. Keyleth, Scanlan, and Vax go to Gilmore's magic item shop, but Gilmore is in Westron working on his second shop. His clerk, Sherry, sends him a magical message to let him know that Vox Machina stopped by, and Gilmore immediately teleports back to the shop to see them. Vax talks to Gilmore about the Underdark and the Horn, I think forgetting that they'd already talked about this subject back in episode 14, which, to be fair, was several months ago for the players. Vax also asks whether Gilmore can help Tiberius get to Kraghammer, and Gilmore sends a magical message to the Lyceum, hooking Vox Machina up with a favor: access to one teleportation sigil of their choice. Vax also buys 3 pretty decent, slightly enchanted daggers, more on that in a bit. Meanwhile, Scanlan and Keyleth do some shopping. Keyleth utterly fails to haggle in a truly spectacular fashion, but Scanlan makes some purchases and gains back some goodwill by singing Sherry a song. Tiberius comes home and gets the amulet they need for House Thunderbrand, just digging his hand into Grog's bag of holding without explaining what he's doing. So here's a lesson. Come on, man. Use your words. I promise it makes it better for everyone. And then he casts Fly on Vex and Grog and himself so they can travel back. Throughout this episode, and I believe through the rest of the show, he seems to treat Fly like it's a second-level spell. Grog actually doesn't come with them, he just flies around the kitchen. Vex and Tiberius meet up with the rest of the party, and Tiberius casts Fly on the others, and they all fly for 12 seconds. But then he and Vex fall because that's how long his circlet allows him to concentrate on 2 spells at once. Again, this is something I touched on back in episode 20, but the last time Tiberius made that mistake, the message didn't sink in because it didn't apply to what he was doing at the time. Essentially, he'd functionally gotten the right answer through the wrong method. Unfortunately, when something like that happens, it's possible the player won't realize they've made a mistake until they really make a mistake. Thankfully, this happens in a situation where Tiberius can fix it pretty quickly and not in the middle of combat or something like that. He casts Fly on all of them with 1 spell slot, and then they fly to the Lyceum together and meet with the headmaster. They can use the favor from Gilmore to get the Kraghammer sigil, but Tiberius will hold that for something else, since they can get the Kraghammer sigil from the Thunderbrands. Why not save that favor when they actually need it for another location? They call the Thunderbrands, they read the inscription on the necklace to prove it is an item from the Thunderbrands, and they are allowed access to the travel rune. But Tiberius used all of his spell slots to fly here rather than walking, so they just go home. But first, Tiberius stops by a blacksmith to get 5 of his daggers fused together into a Krull blade. I'm too young to get the reference. Vax stealths off and finds the house of Kynan, the boy that he beat the hell out of in the previous episode, to give him the daggers. Presumably he wants to set things right, probably by giving Kynan some extra encouragement. But Kynan is gone. He had an argument with his father, took all his stuff, and left. So Vax just goes home. The next morning, Tiberius takes Vex, Scanlan, and Grog to Kraghammer via the teleportation circle. It's hard to understate how much of this episode is about figuring out the logistics of how to get to Kraghammer and get their money. Tiberius tries to ask the head of the Thunderbrand house to re-enchant the magic carpet, but he rolls a 1, so it's not going to be done as a favor for returning the locket. But they do get an estimate. Because of the size of the carpet, which is to say, large enough to fit most of Vox Machina, it would take most of a year and cost 50,000 gold. So that's pretty much out the window. They go to see Lord Nostock Greyspine in the mines to collect their reward for clearing out the dangers that were coming up into Kraghammer. And here, they're reminded that they were going to get some gold for each Duergar scalp they collected, but they never scalped a single creature while in the Underdark. Now, I'm not going to pretend I'm terribly broken up about the fact that they didn't perform an act that is deliberately reminiscent of the way colonizers killed the Native Americans, and I don't fully blame the folks at Critical Role because a lot of us do things like this in lots of different forms. We all have a lot of unexamined influences from colonialism. This won't even be the last one we talk about during the Vox Machina campaign, I have no doubt of that. And on the one hand, this agreement helps demonstrate that Nostock Greyspine is willing to have any Duergar killed, but there's also no opportunity to prove him wrong, so it's taken as a correct assumption about the world that killing Duergar is good, because at this point in the campaign, it kind of was. This remained an unexamined bias until really the second campaign, when Matt started making a much more deliberate effort to add nuance to the typically evil ancestries. But we've already talked a lot about alignment here on this channel in the past, so I'll say this. Here's a lesson. If you're running a game like this, instead of requesting scalps or other body parts from the enemy, I'd recommend that your party has to bring back weapons. You can take advantage of your players' existing hoarding tendencies of shoving everything they find into the bag of holding. Vox Machina does that all the time, but at least this way, they could get something out of it. And whether or not you're already hand-waving encumbrance or worrying about the capacity of the bag of holding, it doesn't really matter how much stuff they collect because it's not going to stay in there indefinitely. The party is giving it all back to you after the adventure for a reward. You can also imply differences, or maybe similarities, between the in-world cultures through the design of their weapons, and it would be a net good for Kraghammer for there to be fewer Duergar weapons in the Underdark and more weapons, and more metal, in Kraghammer. And it also helps sidestep some historically charged imagery of an American atrocity, so that's nice.
Have you heard of a beholder?
You fought a beholder.
We fought a
We
fucking
beat a beholder.
Really?
He almost
And
killed
you're all
us
still alive!
Well, no, not all of us.
Hey.
If you'll recall, there were more of us when we came down here, and some of us aren't here because they died.
And I start pretending to cry.
Make a deception.
That's really good. That's really
And I'm
good.
pretending to cry.
So they walk away with 25,000 gold pieces and teleport back to Amon. While they're gone, Vax ties pink ribbons into Trinket's fur. It's super cute. The party starts doing active prep for the feast at the end of the week. The plan is to magically disguise Percy to look like Vax, and for Scanlan to turn the real Vax invisible so he can sneak around. I also want to highlight something in this scene. Grog doesn't chime in much during this particular planning phase, so Sam, being a generous scene partner, prompts Travis for a reason to be involved.
And we should have some sort of I know it's a few days off, but we should have some sort of safe word, some sort of attack word.
Well, also, we're not hired to
Grog,
kill
any
the
suggestions?
Briarwoods.
Jenga.
Jenga.
Great.
Jenga.
Jenga it is.
This is a nice trick, and it's a simple way that you, as a player, can do your part to make sure that all of the other players are getting a chance to contribute. The party deals with a bunch more downtime activities, so here are a couple of highlights. First, with almost a week left until the party, Grog has a ton of chances to grow a thick beard.
By the end of this week, you have grown what is a rather majestic, full chin beard, matching all over. You were probably the first Goliath to have
Does it
facial
have a
hair, let
mustache
alone
too, or is
quite
it-
that strong. No, it's a full, like we're talking Portland man.
One
Portland
moment, though.
man!
One
Oh no,
moment.
oh no, oh no.
Another thing that I did
Brew coffee.
was go off and get some like a lathering cream,
Okay.
and
You're
on
not.
the second to last night after I took Grog out to the tavern,
Oh
and
no.
bought him a lot of drinks.
You didn't shave
I assume dodge.
Don't, you,
I didn't shave off his whole beard.
don't shave off any of it.
Only
That's
half
so
of it.
Mean.
I just became the most
No.
handsome man in the
Right.
Do
world.
not shave his fucking beard off.
This much.
Make
Make a stealth check.
a stealth check first.
Yes.
Make,
Oh my god,
Make a
he's
perception check.
so
We're
mad
a
at
terrible
you.
person.
Make a perception check.
I have advantage.
Just broke a mechanical pencil.
Ah,
Grog, you come to consciousness. Stretch, reach up to rub half a beard.
I say in a low,
Do we even
guttural
have
growl.
you have no idea it was me.
Vax. I didn't have to wake up to know it was you,
Make an
motherfucker.
intelligence check. Make him make an intelligence check. Why does he know that?
Because you're the only
fucking idiot stupid enough to do that?
Magic is mysterious. Why couldn't you grow half a beard due to magic?
He's already
No,
grown
maybe
4 days on a full beard.
maybe I don't know. Let's say I assume.
I'm not a big fan of pranks, and I particularly don't like prank wars, but this moment is pretty iconic. And I do think there's something interesting here that we can learn from. Liam is basically making an argument that the world of the game could very well be weird and strange enough that magic could have an unpredictable effect. But the problem with that argument is that the world of Dungeons & Dragons is specifically a hard magic world. It's very predictable. Magic and magic items follow very specific, easy-to-understand rules. That doesn't mean that stories with hard magic systems are better than stories with soft magic systems, but it does mean that his effort to argue that Grog couldn't know how the magic would work kind of rings false given how the world of the game functions. Yes, you can argue Grog shouldn't be smart enough to understand it, but that's a larger conversation. I just think it's interesting he tries to use a magic is mysterious defense, given that that's not really true about D&D. Now, I do really like when the common people of the world don't understand magic. I like the world that Liam is implying. I wish a lot more D&D games worked that way. And in fairness, I know there are a lot of other game systems that do work that way, and they are on my list of games to check out. And Liam isn't just doing this because he's trying to prank Grog. There are dozens of times throughout the campaign where Liam plays Vax as someone who truly doesn't understand magic, and doesn't understand that magic has some hard and fast rules. As we've seen from his character in Campaign 2, and from a few one-shots where he plays spellcasters, Liam does know that D&D is a world with a lot of very clear rules. I sometimes think he just kind of longs for a game where the rules are a little bit more unpredictable. Even if magic is still internally consistent, it would be nice if not every PC or NPC perfectly understood how magic worked. But Vox Machina is an extremely high magic game. All the party members have a lot of magic items. And the rules of the game specifically tell us that someone who attunes to a magic item pretty much knows how it works. So Liam is just making a hard sell to Matt and Travis that Grog wouldn't know how the belt works. That being said, later in the campaign, Matt will start trying to find a better balance for how to keep magic and magic items mysterious without changing how the world of the game works, which I just think is interesting. Percy has given Matt a list of items he wants to build. He doesn't want to describe them all aloud because he wants the party, and presumably the audience, to be surprised. So instead he'll just tell Matt he's working on project number 2, project number 3, etc. Matt says he probably won't have time to build all of these. I want you to remember this moment when we get to episode 27, because this is a great way to handle complex projects you want to get done. Give the DM info in advance, clarify what you're trying to do when you feel the DM isn't on the same page, and then accept the DM's rulings. Percy forges some ammo, and then he builds a glove that stores electricity and zaps people. Basically a lightning glove from The Legend of Korra.
I call it diplomacy.
Diplomacy.
That's great.
Vex trains Trinket how to roll into a ball and cannonball through things thanks to his armor. It's going to make him more formidable in battle. The day arrives, and they get all dressed up and head off to the palace for the party. When they arrive, Secret Assume meets up with them, and they fill him in on their plan, such as it is. He asks for the invisible Vax to find and follow him 10 minutes into the meal so they can do some recon together. And then Lord Silas Briarwood and Lady Delilah Briarwood arrive, along with some luggage for their stay at the palace. Tiberius asks Allura to invite Kima on a double date with Grog, and Allura hints that Kima wouldn't be too interested in Grog, but she agrees for a one-on-one tea time with Tiberius sometime. They all sit down to dinner, and thus begins a very tense dinner conversation.
Lord Briarwood, I'm not familiar with Whitestone. How did you become caretaker of such a place?
Before all this occurred, we became very close friends with the Dorolo family about 10 or so years ago. When disease took them and the family passed on, we were surprised that they would have considered leaving Whitestone in our name, and we couldn't say no at this point. They carry on their legacy, I felt, was important enough, let alone the memory of that to carry on the building of this Uriel Bridge.
A toast, then.
Yes.
A toast.
To gracious hosts.
To gracious hosts.
L'chaim.
If the whole family died of disease, weren't you afraid to go into this town, into this castle? Weren't you afraid of
Whitestone?
contracting this disease yourself?
There was a period of time we were worried, but after a few months we came to the conclusion that it was safe, and thus we moved our way in.
Lucky for you.
The best you can make from the citizens, things like, did you notice them? Oh. Yes, don't worry.
Do you have plans on the morrow? I would love to give you a tour of the city.
That would be lovely.
Wonderful. Should I send word? How should we arrange this?
Where are you staying?
We are outside of town at our own keep, actually.
What's it called?
Grey Skull Keep.
The Grey Skull Keep.
Skull Keep.
Yes.
We will have you sent for when the time is right.
Lovely.
The dinner winds down, and Vax realizes he never went and met up with Seeker Assume. Oops. As Silas and Delilah depart, Vex discreetly casts Hunter's Mark on Delilah so she'll know where she is at all times over the next 8 hours. Meanwhile, Vax sneaks up to their room to get some info. He uses his snake belt to distract the guards because apparently his belt can turn into a living snake. Wild. He knocks out the other guard and sneaks into the room, and Silas and Delilah are right there. So Vax spins a story about how he works for the city as sort of an unofficial guard, but it doesn't help that he looks exactly like the person they just had dinner with. Delilah utters some magic words, and Vax's body locks up in place.
You try and flee. I'm merely asking you questions. Come, let us discuss in more private quarters. And you feel the hand of Lord Briarwood slam on your other shoulder.
Yeah.
Don't worry. You look delicious.
And he pulls you into the room as she closes the door behind. And that's where we're going to end.
Why? Why do you do these things?
We had a safe word for a reason!
No!
That's cool.
Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks with episode 25, Crimson Diplomacy. This is a terrific episode, especially the first half. If you want to support the channel, there are a few ways you can do so. You can subscribe or ring the bell to get notified about new videos as soon as they come out. Watching new videos, especially my non-Critical Role videos, really early after they get released, helps a lot with YouTube recommending the channel. You can financially support me on Patreon. Every new patron at any dollar amount really helps a lot. It gets me closer to some of my goals for improving the channel, and also just helps with, life and stuff. You can join my Discord community to hang out with other fans of TTRPGs. There's always some people catching up with Critical Role at various points in the different campaigns, plus they have a ton of recommendations for other actual play shows you might enjoy. And you can sign up for my newsletter to get some occasional updates about what I've got going on. Matt Mercer really nailed the cliffhanger ending on this episode, and if you want to do the same in your own games, check out my video on training yourself to watch the clock during your sessions. Until next time, play fair and have fun.